As a wheel fan, there's nothing that frustrates me more than premature puzzle solving. Players routinely solve the puzzle for small amounts of money when there's still plenty of letters left on the board. For example, let's take a look at this solve.
Crystal, it's your turn. 600.
I would like to solve the puzzle.
Well, you've spun. You should probably call the letter. Might as well get some money.
S.
Yeah, there's an S, and now you still want to solve?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sleeping and grab bag.
Yeah, that's it. Might as well take the money, you know? You don't have to.
No, Crystal, $1,400, and there was 3 G's. Spin the wheel. Big money, Crystal. No. But seriously, I think most of us would agree that for $1,400 you have to spin there. On the other hand, if you have $14,000, you're probably solving. What I'm interested in finding is the break-even point. The amount of money where if you have any less, you should keep spinning, and if you have any more, you should solve the puzzle. And to find that break-even point, I decided to run the numbers. The first thing that we need to know is what all the spaces on all the wheels are, and I've compiled that information here. Now we can put that information into a table, but before we make any calculations, we need to come up with a valuation for all these special squares. If you saw my last video, you know that the $1 million wedge is worth about $3,000 in the first round. Using a similar methodology as what I used for the $1 million wedge, I found that the wild card is worth about $2,000. The trip can vary, but generally it's worth about $6,500, and the gift tag is usually for $1,000. I valued the bankrupts and the lose a turn at negative however much money the player has. This isn't exactly right because you can hit a bankrupt and then have everyone else lose their turn and end up solving the puzzle. But for simplicity's sake, I just went ahead and made this assumption. Okay, so now that we've got our spreadsheet set up and we've made our valuations, we're finally ready to actually run the numbers. First, let's start with the break-even amount, which is the total value of all the spins that aren't bankrupts or lose-a-turns, divided by the number of bankrupts and lose-a-turns, which is 3 2/3. So we can see that the value of the good spins is around $25,000, divided by 3 2/3 is around $6,700, assuming that we're spinning for a single letter. What this means is that if we have $6,700, we're better off spinning the wheel, and if we have $6,800, we're better off solving the puzzle. I also ran the calculation for the case where the player was spinning for 2, 3, and 4 letters, and we see those amounts here. One other thing I was interested in is what happens if you take the trip off the wheel or the $1 million wedge off the wheel. And actually, in the case of the trip, it's pretty simple. It's just whatever the value of the trip is divided by 3 2/3 across the board. So it's just $1,700 less than it would be normally. Removing the $1 million wedge space is a lot more interesting because you're removing 2/3 of a bankrupt and replacing that whole wedge with a $500 wedge. As it turns out, this makes spinning significantly better for the player, and in fact you can spin up to $8,000 even if you're going only for a single letter. So that pretty much covers everything from the first round. Now let's take a look at the break-even calculations for the other rounds. In the mystery round, the break-even amount is a little bit higher, mostly because the mystery wedge is a little bit better than the $600 or $700 vanilla space that it replaces. The mystery round also introduces the half car. I valued the car at $15,000, so basically it just adds a flat $4,000 across the board, which is pretty impressive, so don't sleep on the half car. In the prize puzzle, whoever wins the round automatically wins a trip that's worth about $7,000. So that's why the break-even amounts are about $7,000 less than they are in the other rounds. And we actually get a negative number here, which means if there's only single letters on the board, you should always solve if you can. In the final round, all the special prizes are off the board, so the break-even amount is a little less than in the other puzzles, but still not that much different. So there you have it. The break-even amount is about $6,000 or $7,000 for a single letter, and $4,000 more for each additional letter. So now you know when you should spin and when you should solve. Before I go, I want to look at one other function that we can use this spreadsheet for, and that's the expected value calculation. The expected value is the average outcome of a spin, or the total value of each individual space divided by the number of spaces, which is 24. We can use this calculation to figure out how much money a player figures to make by spinning the wheel. For example, we can consider the spot that Crystal had earlier. She had $1,400, the trip was off the board, and she was spinning for 3 Gs. It turns out that in that situation, spinning had an expected value of about $1,700. We could then take this calculation a step further and say, what if she spins again after that? She'll have an average of about $3,100, and there's one last letter in the puzzle that she can spin for. So by spinning out, Crystal would have had a total expected value of something like $3,400. Another interesting situation that we can consider is if a player has $20,000, but they don't know what the puzzle is, so they have to keep spinning. How bad is it that they have to spin the wheel another time? And we can see from our EV calculation that the player's losing about $2,000 on each additional spin. So that's going to be all for today. If you noticed any mistakes in the calculations, go ahead and let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and have a nice day.